When planning my lessons, I start with the desired learning goals that need to be mastered at the end of the lesson. Then I establish evidence of learning by creating rubrics or scales to correlate with the level of understanding for each learning goal. At the beginning of each lesson, I explain the desired learning goals by clearly articulating the lesson I can statement to ensure the students have a clear understanding of the desired outcome. As the lesson progresses, we visit the learning goals multiple times throughout the lesson to ensure the learning goals are being met by the students. Tracking progress. My students take our state-mandated assessment on a monthly basis as a way to monitor student learning progress. After each monthly assessment, we chart our whole class testing outcomes so we can use this data as a way to measure growth over time. This allows us to reflect on what we could do differently to improve and grow as a learner. In addition to tracking our progress as a class, each student completes an individualized growth chart based on individual performance. By doing so, each child has the opportunity to set and achieve an individual goal each month. Being able to measure the outcome for our whole class as well as individual outcomes allows students an opportunity to become self-motivating for a greater good. Element 3, celebrating success. Frequent celebrations is key in motivating students in first grade to give their best effort on a continual basis. Goal setting is a focus at different levels throughout our classroom. We set class goals that support our social contract as well as academic goals that monitor and measure academic achievement. And we celebrate when we reach these various milestones. I provide various ways of celebrating my students as they gain the knowledge needed to master goals. Verbal feedback is a driving force in celebrating student success. Verbal feedback takes alternative forms within my classroom throughout the day. We have a daily social contract rater that rates how well we will honor our social contract and class goal. My students give verbal feedback through sharing good things and affirming class peers. Verbal feedback allows students to feel special about their accomplishments and take ownership of their achievements. For element 4, informal assessments, I provide numerous opportunities for my students to self-evaluate their learning and how confident they are about various skill sets through the use of proficiency scale rating systems from 1 through 5. At the conclusion of each lesson, I have the students check in by holding up a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 using their fingers to show their level of understanding. This allows me to key in on those students who still have misconceptions and need additional instruction. In some instances, I have the students demonstrate their knowledge by the use of whiteboards used as a response board by writing and showing what they know. For formal assessments, element 5, as a grade level, we implement common curricular assessments for our students. After administering these assessments, we analyze testing outcomes and give collaborative feedback on different instructional approaches that provide student success used in our classrooms. In the area of chunking content, element 6, as a grade level, we give our students pre-assessments to assist in planning effective instruction and meeting the needs of students. Once the pre-assessments are administered, I use the data based on my students' performance to provide appropriate chunking of content so that my students understand the various skill sets that are being taught. Chunking content allows me to monitor my students' learning over time by administering exit tickets. The information the exit tickets gives helps me intervene sooner rather than later. For processing content, element 7, I implement think, pair, share throughout the day during different subjects while teaching various skill sets. This allows all students the opportunity to share with someone else, and it also allows grouping students. Grouping students such as jigsaw cooperative learning is an effective way for students to gain more insight on a topic by sharing within small groups. I find myself using this strategy during language comprehension with oral language and vocabulary activities. For element 8, recording and representing content, we use graphic organizers, mnemonic devices, and summaries. I use a variety of graphic organizers when teaching language comprehension throughout read alouds. The graphic organizers allow me to assist students in organizing their thinking while making connections with others on a shared topic. During phonics, I use mnemonic devices to help my students remember certain generalizations, syllable types, and spelling patterns. I have motions that go along with certain phonics skills, and during instruction, I provide ample opportunities for my students to turn and talk as a way of summarizing learned content and address any misconceptions. For practicing and deepening lessons, for element 9, structured practice sessions, first grade age students require teachers to demonstrate a vast amount of modeling in all subject areas. When learning a new skill, I do frequent structured practices with the whole class, teaching them how to decode and encode different syllable types, what good sentence structure looks like, and how to expand a simple sentence by adding details. as well as decomposing and composing numerals to assist with addition and subtraction. I use the gradual release method, so I do, then we do, then you do, for structured practice, making sure that ample time is spent in each area of practice, and making sure that my students fully understand while closely monitoring and giving immediate corrective feedback. In the area of knowledge application lessons, so element 12, engaging students in cognitively complex tasks. During language comprehension instruction allows me to have my students engage in cognitively complex tasks by asking and answering questions, inferring, comparing and contrasting, retelling, and making predictions on a shared topic. At the conclusion of the lesson, the students are given the opportunity to explain what they learned and what they are still hoping to learn with their shoulder partner and table group. Element 13, providing resources and guidance. As a first grade teacher, my job is to ensure that my students are provided with all resources necessary for learning. As they grow as independent learners, more responsibility is choosing the best resources that are gradually released to them. Offering feedback in an ongoing process by me to my students throughout the day to allow them a chance to learn from their mistakes. Strategies that appear in all types of lessons. Element 19, reflecting on learning. I use exit slips frequently as a conclusion to my daily math and phonics lessons. The exit slips mirror the strategies used throughout the lessons. Students work on these independently, and I use the information that they provide as a way to monitor student progress and skill development. Exit slips are done verbally during language comprehension to gain an understanding of my students' oral language. As for 2-column notes, I demonstrate this strategy with the help from my students when needed using chart paper. For engagement, noticing when students are not engaged, and reacting for element 23. When I see that my students are not fully engaged, I do self-monitoring activities as a way to pull them back in and check for understanding, such as a thumbs up, thumbs down, turn and talk, think, pair, share, take one, give one, or response boards. Implementing small brain breaks throughout the lesson, depending on the length and content of the lesson, such as cardio, desk drumming, go noodle, or would you rather activities, help bring my students back together when they're not engaged. For element 32, motivating and inspiring students. My students love setting goals and working to achieve them. As a class, we have defined short-term and long-term goals. My students are in awe of what it takes to reach these types of goals. We have both short and my students are aware of what it takes to reach these types of goals. We have both short and long-term goals for academic and behavioral success. As for personal projects, my students spend time writing in their journals on a daily basis. They love to write about what they are interested in and share out. For physical movement, element 25, my students' physical movement is an essential part of my classroom. My students participate in center-type activities that allow them to get up and move to different locations around the room. They also have different corner activities that we do for phonics and math activities. For academic games, element 30, with first grade, implementation of academic games is a must. I use which one doesn't belong to all content areas, such as word patterns, number patterns, images, genres of books, etc. We use vocabulary through a game called Quiz Quiz Trade. For rules and procedures, element 33, we use Capturing Kids' Hearts, and we are a national showcase district. So establishing rules and procedures is our main focus throughout the school year. As we see our social contract being broken, we have class meetings as a way to reflect on what we could do differently to ensure the best learning environment for all students. For element 36, acknowledging adherence to rules and procedures, during our morning meeting and daily launch, we take time to affirm and acknowledge the students that are following our social contract. A model of affirming my students verbally often when I catch them making good choices, and I use the Class Dojo point system to reward positive behavior. And as they reach a certain amount of points, they get to choose a reward. For relationships, element 39, understanding students' backgrounds and interests. This is something that is seen as a priority in my class. I want to understand my students' backgrounds and where they come from so that I can better understand them and their behaviors. A good way to do this is by conducting teacher-student conferences. For element 41, for communicating high expectations, demonstrating value and respect for reluctant learners. I establish clear and consistent expectations for all my students on how they're expected to behave. I let students know they are loved and valued while establishing and setting boundaries. When I have reluctant students, I try to document what seems to be the trigger in their disengagement and adjust my lessons as well as daily routines when needed.